Hello. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining me for this live webinar. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about how to get started learning artificial intelligence and machine learning. And obviously, this is a quite challenging topic, and most people actually want to get into artificial intelligence because now it's so trendy, but sometimes it's something that is, I would say, difficult to get in because of a number of reasons, because sometimes it's difficult to understand what you should actually do in terms of the types of areas that you should focus on. And sometimes it's also difficult for other reasons, and that's because artificial intelligence, in a sense, it's a quite difficult area by itself. So in this webinar, we're gonna look into some of the ways that you could actually use and some strategies, and I'm gonna give you tips about how you can get started with AI and machine learning. So first of all, I just want to say that we're going to have a 30-second delay. So if you want to write me questions or comments in the chat, and I invite you to do that, just be aware there's going to be some kind of lag there. So I maybe just respond to you with some delay there. And as I was mentioning, just write questions at all time if you have doubts or things that you would like to just clarify. And then towards the end of this session, we are going to have a question and answer session as well. So you can just decide to wait with your questions, and I'm going to respond to that, and you can directly interact with me. So, but without any more waiting, we can start with the presentation and with the actual content here. Okay, so let me share the presentation here. So now you should be able to see the presentation. Okay, so just to start, I'll start introducing a little bit of myself. So I'm Valerio Velardo. I am a co-founder and CEO of MeloDrive. So MeloDrive is a startup that's using artificial intelligence for generating music for video games and non-linear media in general. And this is one of my big passions. So that of combining together artificial intelligence and the arts, or specifically music. And that's because of my background. So basically, I have a PhD in artificial intelligence and music. And so in the past, I was looking at how we can teach machines to be creative with music. So basically using AI algorithms for creating music, and specifically rock songs. And my background is a little bit varied, because I come both from a more musical background. So I'm a composer at the end of the day, a musician, but I also did physics and astrophysics at degree level. And I got into artificial intelligence because I thought it was a super interesting thing to do and to know about. And that happened when I was doing my degree in physics. So I got interested, obviously, in programming, and then I was really into this idea of teaching machines to do things that are intelligent, and then teaching machines to do things that may be creative. So I didn't do computer science at degree level, and the whole point was that for me it was a little bit difficult to get into artificial intelligence, and it took me a lot of time to learn it by myself, because it wasn't something that I was studying. It wasn't the focus of my study. So, and in that period, basically, I devised a number of strategies that I've used basically to master artificial intelligence. And that's why like I want to share like this knowledge with you guys today, because I know that learning artificial intelligence can be really a hassle. So there are loads and loads of things that are like quite difficult to understand. And so without any further ado, let's move on to like the actual learnings that you'll pick up like from today's webinar. So first of all, you'll start recognizing different areas you should you should study to master artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I feel this is like one of the big issues, because like artificial intelligence is such like a big thing by itself that sometimes we really don't need we don't know where we should focus on. Also, like as a next point, I want you to identify and recognizable available free resources that you can access to learn artificial intelligence and machine learning. And there are like loads of this, and it's very refreshing to know that there's so many people on the internet that are sharing like their knowledge like with other people. And today I'm just gonna like point you towards like a few resources that I feel are very, very good as a starting point. And then as a final point, I want to give you a strategy to build an effective custom plan to learn artificial intelligence and machine learning. So as when you learn everything, for example, like a language, you need to have like a clear plan of how you should do that. And I feel that it's important for you to just like learn a few strategies that you can use to optimize like that learning process. So I bet that for you, like the prospect of learning artificial intelligence feels like a little bit like overwhelming, I would say, like a mess, chaos. So you probably being like someone who's getting into artificial intelligence, it may feel, well, there's so much like to understand, there's so much to learn, so many things like we should like just check, that it can be overwhelming. So hopefully after like the end of this session, you'll be able to have like a better idea of where to look and how to look around. Obviously, I'm not going to get into details of like artificial intelligence, but I'm going to try to give you like a strategy that worked for me like 10, 15 years ago, like basically starting to learn like this amazing area. And I hope that you can use that to just like get into like this fascinating field. So let's start with a very quick overview of like the webinar. So first of all, so if you want to learn artificial intelligence, you have to decide what are like the goals, what's like that you really want to learn, and what are like the things that you want to pick up, because there's so much things that you could do that it can feel like overwhelming. So first step is set learning goals. The second point is just like to look at core learning areas, and we're gonna have like a deep look at this and just like understand what are the things that are necessary for you to like master artificial intelligence. Third, I'm gonna present a number of like learning resources that you can use for yourself, and just like create your own like custom plan, which you can do like with the point number 4 that I'm going to discuss, which is like the learning workflow. So basically, I'm going to give you like a strategy and a few different ways you could actually tackle like the issue of learning machine learning. And final point, it's going to be like a very quick wrap up, a recap, and then we're going to go straight into question and answer. Cool. So let's start off with setting learning goals. So yeah, the first point that I would suggest you is that you should commit, because learning artificial intelligence, it's a huge, huge thing. And so the first thing you should do is just like commit yourself 100% like to learn it. So the first thing I would suggest you to do is give yourself a year and just like focus yourself on this idea of like having 1 year of a lot of like learning, a lot of study that you would have to basically improve your knowledge of artificial intelligence. And one of the things that you should also do is just to be very, very consistent. So every day, just allocate a couple of hours and just like focus on both like the theory of artificial intelligence as well as like the implementation of that. Because like one of the amazing things that you have in AI is that you have these two levels. So the level of the theory, which is like super interesting, but then you obviously have the level of implementation. So if you could have a couple of hours every day and say spend half an hour a day doing theory and an hour and a half doing implementation, that would be amazing. And in a matter of a few months, you'll just realize that you're going to pick up so many new techniques, so many things, and you'll just like improve a lot. But as a key point, just commit yourself to learning. So the next point that I want to discuss is one that I feel is very important, because like artificial intelligence is not just you can't like enter artificial intelligence and look at that as if it was some kind of monolithic single field and there's only one way like to learn it. There are loads and loads of like different levels. And actually, one way of looking at that is to decide the theoretical depth that you're willing to get into. So let me explain this like a little bit more. So you can start like playing around with artificial intelligence and machine learning as a hacker would do. So you have loads of very high level libraries, AI libraries like Keras, for example, that's built on top of TensorFlow. And you could use those just like to build a bunch of like neural nets, or you could use, say, for example, scikit-learn, which is an amazing machine learning library in Python. And you could use that to solve all sorts of problems, but probably at that point, you wouldn't really understand the theory behind it. It's still okay. So if you just want to play around with that, and it's an amazing way to like get into artificial intelligence in the first place. But then if you want to go the extra mile, then, and if you want to go at the level of like a practitioner, then obviously you need to know more about the theory that you have behind all of these like libraries. And you need to understand that, because in order to improve the performance of your algorithms, you need to understand what's going on like at the level of the theory. And I would say if you push yourself even more, then you would find the level of the researcher, who's like a person who's actually into the math and into the all complexity that you have with artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of complexity there. So I think like what's really important for you as a first step is just like to understand where you are like in this spectrum. Do you want to approach artificial intelligence more as a hacker or more as a practitioner who's really interested like in the tools and having a fair understanding of like the algorithms? Or do you want to go the extra mile and really understand all the bits and blobs of the theory? In that case, you basically are approaching that as a researcher and getting interested into like the math that's actually powering all of these like very powerful algorithms. So pick a theoretical depth and decide where you want to stand there. So the next point here that I would suggest is to pick a couple of AI specific areas you want to become an expert in. The point here is that there are so many applications that it can feel overwhelming sometimes to like learn and thinking about like learning artificial intelligence. So you could focus on natural language processing, generative art, and music, which is like my kind of like focus. You could focus on very intelligent chatbots, image processing, audio processing, you name it really. So instead of like focusing on all of these things, just focus on the things that you really love and you think that you are the most interested in. Pick one or two of them and just focus on them, on those two, like for this year, basically, where you like start learning all the algorithms. And while you learn the algorithms, you can actually apply them to these specific like areas that you may be interested in. Cool. And so now we move on to the second step, which I think is very, very important. So the question here is, what are the core learning areas that you should focus on? So I feel there are three different areas that are super important to master in artificial intelligence. So first of all, you have math. So mathematics is super important to like understand how all of these algorithms like work. And in the realm of mathematics, you have different like branches. So you have like linear algebra, which is fundamental for everything that involves neural networks and deep learning. Then you have calculus, statistics, probability, and logic. So the first four, so linear algebra, calculus, statistics, and probability, are very, very important for machine learning and deep learning. Logic is very important for more traditional artificial intelligence. So things like expert systems or knowledge-based systems or rule-based systems, their logic is very important. But the whole point is that when you start learning this like mathematical like theories like and concepts, you start building your own tool sets to actually have a deeper understanding of like how artificial intelligence work. Now, again, you can have an understanding of all of these branches of mathematics, which could be like at different levels. So you could become an expert, and that would definitely like help you in actually mastering artificial intelligence. Or you could have a very like superficial understanding of that and still be able to use like your AI algorithms in a very like efficient way. But it's important that you get like familiar with these branches of mathematics and that you have at least a fair understanding of them. So now on to the second big area, that's programming. And obviously this is not a surprise by any means. So as a first point, I would highly suggest you to look into the object-oriented paradigm. And that's because this is not necessarily important if you're doing like data science or if you're doing like scripting or this kind of stuff. But if your goal is that of actually building robust and quite complex AI systems in the long run, this is something that's going to be like necessary. So you need to master object-oriented programming in order to build flexible code, which is very usable and reusable. And in terms of the programming language that you should choose, obviously you could use like whatever programming language you want, but I would highly suggest you to focus on Python. And that's because Python is a very powerful programming language that has loads and loads of, So Python has loads and loads of AI libraries that you can use without like reinventing the wheel. And at the same time, it's a very simple language to pick up. And so I would suggest you to like focus on Python and just like get acquainted with that. And one of the benefits that you get from like getting like involved with Python is that this is basically the programming language of choice when it comes to AI in the industry. So Google is actually endorsing Python, and many startups are using Python when they do artificial intelligence and deep learning. Now onto the last area, which I think obviously is very important for like mastering like this field, and obviously it's AI itself. But AI is a kind of a like catch-all term. Actually, AI can be divided into a number of different like categories. So you have the so-called good old-fashioned AI or symbolic AI, which is all those algorithms like search algorithms or like expert systems or like probabilistic systems that somehow were super fashionable like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And even though like now all the buzz and the kind of like everything is kind of like dominated by machine learning and deep learning, I think that knowing symbolic AI is still very, very important, because it gives you loads of like algorithms that are gonna actually like increase your tool set that you can use and you can apply to your problems, because not all problems unfortunately can be tackled with machine learning and deep learning. That may be because you don't have a way of getting loads and loads of data for doing like supervised learning, for example, or for all other reasons, because sometimes actually learning is not the best solution. Rather, you should just like go back to like other types of AI techniques like planning or evolutionary algorithms, and it's worth knowing all of this. Then the next AI area, which I think is very important, obviously, and it's super fashionable, like right now, it's machine learning itself. And so this is like a very important like area, and it's like that area where basically we're using data to provide like to actually train our algorithms and to be like more efficient with like the algorithms that we built. And the final point here is deep learning, which is basically a subset of machine learning. And it's basically using neural networks with loads and loads of like hidden layers. So in neural networks, obviously you have layers of neurons. If you have more than one hidden layer between like the input layer and the output layer, you're actually doing deep learning. And this is like the most fashionable thing like right now in AI, and it's giving us a lot of like satisfaction in terms of like the result that we are like achieving. Think of like DeepMind with AlphaZero, AlphaGo with this like amazing like artificial intelligence that are able to like outperform like human beings at chess, at another like very complex game called Go, and all other like types of games. So now let's move on to the third point. So now that we know more or less like what we should focus on in terms of like areas for like mastering AI, let's look at learning resources that we can find on the internet. And obviously internet here, it's really your friend. So you have all sorts of available like classes online. So you have like amazing websites like Khan Academy, Coursera, Udacity, where you have loads and loads of classes that cover all types of like fields and topics that we are interested in order to learn artificial intelligence. And specifically, so if we want to tackle programming and Python, so I would highly suggest you to check out like this YouTube channel called Syntax. This is a guy who's built an amazing community of Python learners. He's got hundreds of videos about like Python programming. And so if you are just like beginning with Python, or even if you are like an intermediate programmer, I would highly suggest you to go and check out Syntax, because he's really amazing. So the next point is mathematics, so math resources. So here I've listed like a number of classes. So like, for example, like on Khan Academy, you can find a linear algebra course. And then on Coursera, you have Introduction to Logic. And again, on Khan Academy, you have calculus one and statistics and probability. So now, don't worry about like not being able to like access like this links right now, because I'm going to share like these slides with you, and so just like wait from like my email and you're gonna have this later. Cool. So now let's move on to AI resources. So here again, I think like the key classes that you can find are like on Coursera, Udacity, and all of these like amazing like e-learning platforms. So specifically on Coursera, there's this machine learning class, which is taught by Andrew Ng, who's like an amazing researcher in machine learning. I did this class myself, and it was like really, really amazing, very, very well done. And then on Udacity, you have Intro to Artificial Intelligence. The cool thing about this is that it's taught by Peter Norvig, who's kind of god of like the AI research like field. And so he's like an amazing researcher. He's an amazing professor. And the cool thing about this class is that it's actually covering symbolic AI. So it's like another perspective on artificial intelligence, and one that will get you started with like things that right now like are kind of overlooked, I would say, because everyone is basically focusing on machine learning and deep learning, and they are just ignoring like symbolic AI, which sometimes are actually very often is more efficient than like deep learning or just machine learning. And then I would also suggest you to check out the Intel AI Academy. And so they have this class, which is called Deep Learning 501, which is a very short class, but it's very focused on the point, and they'll teach you how to use Keras, this very good AI library for like doing like deep learning. So just like go check these resources out. And then you have the Python AI mailing list, which is like my personal mailing list. And so here, what I do basically is I send out like weekly emails with theory, implementations, and applications in artificial intelligence. And so these are going to cover artificial intelligence in terms of like its symbolic kind of like area, as well as machine learning and deep learning. And this is for me like a very nice way of just like being like sharing like my knowledge in a sense, and then just like to do some kind of like nice kind of like AI exercises and share it like with a community. And I hope like that this can also like help you get started. So here you have the link, and so when I'll share like the slides, you can just like access that. Cool. So what's really great news about like all of these resources that I've talked about like until now is that they are free. So as I was saying, internet is really your friend. So the moment you know what you should look for and how you should like learn and create like your own learning process, then the internet is your friend. So go there and just like enjoy this like amazing content that's like out there, and enjoy it for free. Cool. So now let's move on to the fourth step, which is that of the learning workflow. And I think like this is a crucial aspect of like the learning process, because it's one thing to know what are like the important like areas like to pick up like for learning AI. It's another thing to actually pick them up and to learn them. So you need a method, you need a workflow that's repeatable. So what I find like really useful when I learned like AI in the first place, but this is something that I do like all the time when I learn like new things, is to manage my learning process with a time management on like software. So I'm very familiar with Trello. I don't know if you are, but if you're not, you should definitely like check this out, because like it's a very simple way you could like organize your learning process. So if you look like in this slide, you'll see that you can organize like all of your like learning tasks into like different cards, and you are going to have like different like columns, and in these different columns you can create your own workflow. So you're going to have a backlog, you can have like a ready to start column, doing now, under review, and finished. And so if you organize your like learning process like in tiny bits, you just like be able to be on top of that, and you'll be able to kind of like follow the complexity and be on top of that, because most likely you're going to learn stuff from math, stuff from AI, stuff from programming, and so it can feel like a little bit like kind of like disarticulated. But if you use like a central time management software like Trello, so that would be that would like really work like a charm, because it's a way of like having a very kind of a streamlined process for learning and just like reviewing what you've done and keeping track of that, which is probably the most important thing that you can do when you are learning something new. So moving on, I think what's really cool about AI and programming, obviously in general, is that it's not just about the theory. So, like personally, as I was mentioning, like at the beginning of this webinar, I come from astrophysics, so and like music composition, and these are like very abstract kind of fields. So sometimes you feel that you are completely detached, like from practical applications of like the stuff that you learn. This, fortunately, it's not the case for like AI or programming, for that matters. So in that case, like theory and applications are really, really tied together. So I think like one very useful way of like learning AI is by actually working on small AI projects while you're learning. So what I would suggest you is to just like pick up every month a project which is small and manageable, but it's not too small that it's just like 20 kind of like lines of code and that's it. And then you should focus on that. It could be something like, say, for example, like a recommendation system for music, or it could be doing some like prediction of like, I don't know, like diagnosis using like some machine learning for like diagnosing whether or not like someone has like a disease like diabetes or stuff like that, that are still like very constrained, but are kind of like almost real world problems. So this would actually get you in the habit of like doing stuff for real and just like getting your like theory and put it there like into practice, which is something that I really suggest you to do. So, and obviously, like you may ask yourself, but why bother like with these projects? Like, why should we actually like spend time doing this? Well, and the answer to that is that obviously you can apply your newly acquired knowledge, and that's like really, really cool. But also, like one thing that I think is crucial is that sometimes when we learn AI, we learn the theory and we learn by example, and we follow like what like the teacher tells us basically. And most of the time, what the teacher or the professor tells us is a kind of like very simple story, and it's not really the real story. So you're gonna see loads and loads of very simple problems that are like tackled during like these classes, like the ones that I shared, for example, like the machine learning course by Andrew Ng, or like the Peter Norvig course. So they're amazing, but they usually tackle relatively simple problems. And so, but you soon realize that like problems in the real world are way more difficult than toy problems. And so by doing like these projects that are kind of like that kind of have like the same level of complexity or a little bit less than real world problems, you'll just realize by yourself that there's a whole difference between like the theory like, that we learn and like the toy problems, and then going out there and just like trying to tackle like problems. And the nice kind of like side effects that you'll have from like doing like these projects, say you have like a year-long plan for learning AI, and then you do a project every month, then all of a sudden, by the end of like this process, you're gonna have 12 projects. And this is portfolio. And so, and that's like something that like it's important to have if you want to get a job like in AI or machine learning. So, and that's like, for example, when we hire people at MeloDrive, we always ask like for people like the people who want like to be part of our team to send us like what their portfolios of what they've done and to like share their code. And this is like something very important. So it will help you being like more being in a better position to be hired, and at the same time it will also help you in terms of like getting your hands dirty like in the real world. Cool. So one other like piece of advice that I have for you guys is that learning AI, it's like a very difficult, daunting task. So I would highly suggest you to team up with other people and learn together. So this is like something that I've done like in the past, not necessarily like with AI, because that like I learned by myself, but when I was like learning like new things, I would actually go out like with other people, team up with them, and just like learn together. So this doesn't mean that you have to necessarily be like in the same place. You can just like create like a Facebook group where you share like the stuff that you've worked on, or you could just have like even weekly Skype calls, for example. So just like go on like Facebook groups, say, hey, I want to learn AI. Is there like anyone else who wants to do like this with me? We're going to have like monthly projects. We're going to have, I'm going to like learn these topics. Who else wants to join? And you can just like create your own Facebook group or whatever, and just like share your learning experience with other people. And this will definitely help you kind of like keep one another in check. And that's like a very important thing, because sometimes like when you learn, you may be like a little bit lazy, or like, I mean, you know, like how these things go. So like having like other people and kind of being accountable with other people, it's something that will obviously like streamline your learning process. And at the same time, you can actually help each other out. And that's like a really cool thing. When you're learning, like the best thing is just like to share your doubts with other people. Sometimes like obviously with teachers, but sometimes also like with other learners, because like you're learning together, and it's like an amazing process. So yeah, try to team up with other people when learning AI for sure. Cool. So now we are at the end basically of this like session. So let's have a quick look at all of the steps that we went through in a very quick way. So the first point that's very important for you guys is to set your learning goals. So this means, so just be clear about what you want to do with artificial intelligence. Do you want to be like to just hack around? Do you want to be a practitioner, or do you really want to get the whole thing and push like the algorithms and the math behind the algorithms more? And that's like a very important decision. And along with that, understand what's your like specialization. What are the things that you really love and that you would really apply artificial intelligence to? Then, as a second point, focus on the core learning areas. And as we saw them, these are mathematics, programming, and obviously AI. Just be sure like to cover those, because they're equally important. If you do just programming, yeah, you can just like end up like scripting and using like a little bit like of, I don't know, TensorFlow here and there, but you really won't get the whole thing behind artificial intelligence. So just like focus on these huge pillars. And then just remember that internet is your friend. So get out there, use like some of the resources that I've like that I shared like during this webinar, or just like use Google. Obviously, like internet is your friend. Just use like the free content that you find there. And then organize your learning schedule. So use a time management software and organize like your learning process into a number of like different tasks that you'll have, and so that you can keep track of your progress and keep yourself like in check. And then obviously build more AI applications while learning. So just get your hands dirty. This is gonna help you so much to just like put into practice all the kind of abstract stuff that you've learned from the internet and from other resources. And finally, join or create a learning group. This is gonna really speed up your learning process. So this is like very important. So just like be sure that you go through like all of these points, and now you have like a better way of like looking at AI and looking at how you can actually learn it. So now we can move on to questions. So guys, if you have questions, just like write them down on the chat and I'll try to answer those questions. Cool. Okay, so let me check here. Cool. Okay, so one thing that I want to say while like I'm waiting like for your questions, guys, is first of all, it'd be great if you could like send me like some feedback like about this session, and also just like suggest other topics like for future webinars. That would be like really cool. And as I said, I'm gonna like send you like these slides and the video as well as a reference. Like I'm gonna like email you with this, and I'm gonna also add the slides like for people who are gonna see this like offline, not like online, like in real time. I'm gonna like add that in the comments. And yes, so it'd be great, guys, if you could like suggest new topics like that you may want me like to cover in the future. Okay, so Rick is asking, so first of all, is it possible to have some of your mail is go into machine learning techniques that are very popular, common? Yes, yeah, definitely. So I'm planning on doing that. So I started with search. So like if you sign up like on my mailing list, you're gonna see that like the first few emails are focused on search algorithms, but like my plan is to also tackle machine learning techniques like moving forward. So like neural networks and like other stuff. So yeah, definitely. Okay, so Rick is also asking about possible literature for machine learning at an accounting company, so where they want to implement machine learning in their auditing process, and I'm looking for good literature. So now I have to say that obviously I'm not an expert like in that field specifically. So what I'm gonna do, Rick, is well, actually what you can do is just like drop me an email. So you should already have my email, and it's just like here on the video. So you can just like get that, drop me an email there. I'll just like do some research for you, and I'll just like try like to respond to you, because as I said, I'm not really that informed about like using machine learning for auditing process. Cool. Are there any questions? Other questions, guys? Cool. Cool. So if there are no other questions, I think I'm gonna close this. And so first of all, like, thank you very much like for joining this session, and I hope like you'll join like the next, and I hope you'll also like join my mailing list, and I wish you like all the luck learning artificial intelligence. And I hope like this session was like a useful kind of like intro and suggestion for you. So thank you very much for being here, and see you next time. Bye.